Will Ahsoka be part of the Star Wars Resistance animation series? What was she up to during the original trilogy? And how did she leave Malachor? Speculation on all these questions and more. But before I get to that, I want to say I'm Mike, and welcome back to Force Within TV, where we're building a Star Wars animation community, and we'd love you to join us by subscribing. But back to those questions. I've brought on the show Andy of Star Wars Rebels Transmissions, and we chat about Ahsoka. So let's get right into the questions. So Andy, do you think we could see Ahsoka in the newly announced Star Wars Resistance animation show?
The new Star Wars Resistance? I don't think so. I think that we're going to get a separate series dealing with Ahsoka and Ezra, Sabine, and all that stuff. I think we're going to get a different sort of 3D animation series, maybe more in the style of Star Wars Rebels than what Resistance will end up being. I think that's where we're going to see it. I just can't see Ahsoka being around, not necessarily dead, but being around the kind of Resistance storyline.
Yeah, it would be a bit of a challenge as a writer to incorporate her in and then, explain how she wasn't part of the sequel trilogy. Not only do they need to explain how she wasn't part of the original trilogy, but now they're going to have to explain why she wasn't part of the sequel trilogy. That's definitely going to be a challenge. So I can see that one. Exciting, though, that we might actually get a second animation series. I know that has been talked about by Dave Filoni and others. But moving on to our second topic here. Do you think Ahsoka could be working behind the scenes to manipulate events during the Galactic Civil War, during the original trilogy, similar to, say, Darth Sidious, but working as an agent of good? So what do you think? Basically, what do you think Ahsoka was up to during the original trilogy?
I think that after the events of A World Between Worlds, she largely kept out of the Galactic Civil War. I think, kind of like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, that she probably kind of came to the conclusion that that wasn't her fight. Kind of like how she sort of decided it in The World Between Worlds that her fight with Darth Vader, that wasn't hers to have anymore. And that it was, but unlike Luke, it was kind of made for the right reasons. Like, no, I need to sort of take a step back here and let others fight their fight, not interfere quite so much. I think that she probably largely kind of kept out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, she could have ultimately seen, and this kind of bleeds into our next question, but she could have ultimately seen in World Between Worlds something about Luke and redeeming Anakin and that fate. We know from, she doesn't have any experience with the World Between Worlds, but she seems very wise to the idea that she can't mess with the timeline, right? So it would make sense. I like the idea. And despite what some people say about Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, like it is a sort of a Jedi thing to withdraw and, fight again another day. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, it's definitely a thing.
It is. I think Luke, sort of going into The Last Jedi a little bit, I think Luke was doing it in his mind for the right reasons. He saw Ben Kenobi, he saw Yoda do this. They were obviously doing it for different reasons than what he was doing. His was more based on fear, I think, and the Force was always trying to get him back into the fight, and he was just cutting himself off from it. But yeah, you're right. It's a very Jedi thing to do. It's just not a very Luke Skywalker thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. I respect the fact that not everybody bought into it.
Oh, I did. I did, but yeah.
Yeah. Moving on to another topic here, though. Do you think Ahsoka was headed back to the World Between Worlds on Malachor? So we see her in the Topps trading cards, right? And it looks like she goes through something, similar to the portal that Ezra did to get to the World Between Worlds. So we're back on Malachor after she's been in the World Between Worlds with Ezra. She's going, through the steps with those Topps trading cards. Do you think she goes back to the World Between Worlds?
I don't think she goes back to the World Between Worlds, but what I think the World Between Worlds does have in common with something we've seen before is Mortis. And I think she is going into a place that has something to do with Mortis, perhaps even Mortis itself for a time. Maybe even going there to meditate, become stronger with the Force, maybe enlightenment, all that Jedi stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be cool. Yeah, and of course there's that would be sort of its own little place. She could become recluse and maybe even find some relics. We know she has the staff as well.
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
One of the things I'd also thought, and I thought this was where you were going with this, was actually maybe we've seen the wolves, which are in that circular pattern on the wall in the Topps trading cards, and we know the wolves have the ability to sort of hyperspace jump or whatever you want to call it, using the Force, and perhaps that's how she gets off Malachor in the first place, right? Because
very possible.
Yeah, even if she does get to Mortis, then she still has this problem of how does she get off Mortis and how does she, get to Sabine and Lothal in the end. It's always interesting to think about these things, right?
It is. And going back to Luke, I mean, there might even be some connection between, I mean, he obviously goes on crate. That is a Force projection. He's not truly there. But I mean, maybe that's connected to what the wolves are doing. It's just it's sort of a variation on that Force power.
So moving on to another topic here. One of the favorite things I've presented on my channel is how Ahsoka has had this connection between her and the Children of the Force. We've seen it in the Clone Wars, we saw it a little bit in her novel, and we saw it even in Star Wars Rebels. So do you think moving forward there will be any connection between the Children of the Force and Ahsoka?
I definitely like that idea. With the Inquisitors all either dead or dissolved by the Galactic Civil War, I think Vader and the Emperor were so focused on Luke, which is one of the reasons the Empire didn't come back to Lothal. I could see that. I could see Ahsoka maybe just finding some of these young sensitives, perhaps the ones that Ezra and Kanan and Ahsoka found during season 2. So yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I really like the idea. I know I've had a couple commenters say perhaps, it wouldn't be Ahsoka's way to sort of take these young children and put them somewhere by themselves or raise them all herself. Maybe taking the entire families and those children, explaining the situation and letting it be a choice for them. I feel that would be more of her way of doing things, and perhaps taking them somewhere in wild space where they would be a little more, safe. Some people have suggested the Lasat homeworld in wild space, but how exactly would she get there? That would be, there's a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through.
Did she even know about it? Or, she'd have to speak to Hera and Sabine, and that's a whole sort of different story. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I don't think she was training them or maybe even spending a lot of time with them. But I can imagine her using her resources to keep them safe and out of reach of the Empire.
Yeah, it is. It's a really cool connection, right, between sort of all her story threads. And I would certainly like to see it come up again at some point, especially if we do get that animation show that you had mentioned. Dave Filoni putting forth with Ezra and the search for Ezra, or whatever it might turn out to be.
Yeah, definitely. And that could also intercede with Luke's story if Luke ended up coming into that animated series, if it did happen.
Yeah, awesome.
Because I'm sure he's looking for students to train as well outside of Ben Solo. So
yeah, for sure. That would be very cool if there was a connection there. So moving on, is there any other? I mean, you talked about Mortis, Ahsoka going to Mortis. Is there anything else that you think she might have done during the original trilogy?
Well, I think she was on her own spiritual journey during the original trilogy, perhaps discovering the origins of the Mortis gods with the aid of Mirai, and even the first Force users that may have gone on to become the first Jedi. So, yeah, I think it'd be really cool to see Ahsoka with those ancient Jedi texts from The Last Jedi. Maybe she actually goes to Ahch-To during her journey, maybe to try and rediscover what the Jedi were originally going to be, sort of similar to what Luke was doing, but in a more kind of positive way. So, yeah, I think that maybe she's used that to kind of train herself to use the Force in a different, perhaps more powerful way than what we've seen before. And that's kind of why she looks more kind of sage-like when we saw her in the season 4 finale. But yeah, I reckon we'll learn more about that in the next series.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that idea, especially, the connection there, the similarity between Luke and Ahsoka, her going to Octo, learning more about the Prime Jedi, understanding all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's really cool. All right, so moving on here, awesome ideas, Andy, but I'd like to get to know you a bit more. Who is your favorite Star Wars Rebels character?
Well, I love them all for different reasons. To be honest, I actually really like all of the characters. I really liked how Ezra's story arc ended and how everything had gone through informed his decisions in that finale. And Sabine just had some amazing episodes by the end. And I think we've only seen like a small part of her full story arc. As I say, that potential TV series, I really do think Dave Filoni's working on. I think we're going to get, obviously, we're going to get a lot more Sabine in that. And I think we'll get some of the unanswered questions regarding her time on Lothal. I know some fans did have sort of a problem with that. They thought that she was just on Lothal kind of doing nothing. I think she probably was doing something, but I kind of get the complaint of that. And there's a lot of stuff obviously going on with her family on Mandalore and their own civil war, and her just seeing her journey beyond the sort of finale. But yeah, my favorite character is Kanan. I think he had the strongest story arc out of everyone in the series. And then obviously outside the series, he had his own comic book, which was amazing. A New Dawn, which was very good as well. And most of my favorite moments from the series involve Kanan in some way. And I think his death was probably the most emotionally charged scene that Star Wars has ever had for me, films included. So yeah, I think Kanan is my favorite character.
He's definitely mine as well. And, going back and just mentioning, like you had said, the comic as well as the book. I mean, he's just one of the most developed Star Wars characters, period. And he's so relatable, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is a character who has had real struggles, like most of us have, right? He's not just a proper Jedi, and he's already been trained, and he knows, he knows no problems. He's definitely worked through a lot, and he did that not only before Rebels, but also during Rebels. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And when he starts acting more Jedi-like in sort of season 3 and season 4, you know how he got to that point. It's not just he just comes in and acts all mysterious and like some Jedi masters kind of do. You kind of know where he's coming from and how he actually got to that point, because it's all coming from his own sort of story, from his life and everything he's gone through, from his blindness to when he lost his master and sort of learning more to trust the Force, and himself as well. So yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Do you think there was some sort of connection between Kanan and Lothal?
Yeah, I mean, my theory was that he was born on Lothal. And maybe he was, but they never really gave an answer to that. But yeah, I thought he was actually, they kept on alluding to the fact that, Kanan kept on alluding, like, we always come back to Lothal. And Hera was like, well, yeah, we were fighting the Empire here. And he was like, no, there was something else to it. And my take on that was that he himself had a strong connection to Lothal, and obviously there was the Force that was bringing them back as well, because Kanan was supposed to do the things that he did in season 4. But the reason he had that connection in the first place, I felt, was because that was where he was born and that's where his family was from.
Yeah, really cool. I've definitely done a video on that myself and suggesting that he was from Lothal, especially the cave art. There's, and really what set that all off was an interview with Freddie Prinze Jr. and him discussing, and suggesting that as well, right? That we're going to learn more about Kanan and his connection to Lothal, I think was a direct quote. Something to that effect, right? And then we never really got that answer, right? It was
no, Fred. I love Freddie, but sometimes he says things and it's like, wasn't really answered. He's like, you're gonna see this. I'm like, I don't think we did see that, but he definitely gets me hyped for the.
He does absolutely, absolutely. Series, so thanks so much for joining me for this theory crafting discussion, Andy. Really appreciate it. Where do you think where can people follow you online?
Yeah, not a problem. Well, my personal Twitter handle is Andy_Peachy, or my Rebels feed is at Rebels_TK421. Or you can follow my Rebels page on Facebook, which is at Star Wars Rebels Transmission, or it's Star Wars Rebels and Resistance Transmission now.
Yeah, and I'd say a lot of the people who follow the channel already probably like that Facebook page and follow you on Twitter. But if they don't, definitely look up Star Wars Rebels Transmissions. I will have it linked in the description in the comments below. And definitely give Andy a follow. He runs a great page, always consistently, posting amazing artwork from folks and absolutely the latest news. So definitely check it out. Thanks so much for coming on the channel there, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thanks, Mike.
I want to thank Andy so much for coming on the show. And remember, I'm Mike, and I'd love to have you subscribe and join our Star Wars animation community where we share our thoughts and encourage those who do the same. So my theory crafting friends, let's finish with today's question of the day. Do you think we will see Ahsoka in a separate animation series as Andy suggested, or could we possibly see her in Star Wars Resistance? Let me know in the comments below, and may the Force be with you.